This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics, and we promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. In this episode, we have Paul Neto, co-founder, chief marketing officer at Measure Protocol. Paul, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be on here.
This is cool. Thank you for coming. All right, let me set the stage first, as I always do on this show. Okay, if you work in a brick-and-mortar mall, you can see your customers in person daily. And even you have a chance to know some of them better than others. If you own a mobile app, you stare at your laptop screen, and you better have a good consumer intelligence platform in hand to have a clue about what people use your app, so you can serve them well. In this episode, we have Paul to talk about his company's AppLife Report 2023 Volume 2 that talks about app users' behavior. But first, Paul, before anything else, let's talk about you and your background in tech. Tell us about yourself, please.
Sure. So I've been in, tech in different aspects for about 25 years now. So that's starting to show my age. But I've also, had an opportunity to experience a few different things. Ever since I graduated from uni, my first job was working for a software developer. And a lot of my experience has been around research technology and ad technology. I was fortunate in the early 2000s to be part of early stage research technology company. And, part of the reason why they were tech-based is there was no technology in this realm. Even things like SurveyMonkey didn't exist back then. And prior to that, first experience, I was in tech that was involved around processing, building software to process satellite imagery, or using, sonar for bathymetry, ocean mapping, or scanning, the ocean bottom, looking for lost treasure, lost planes, or helping settle, boundary disputes between countries. But that's a different world, different time. But, getting back to the ad tech and research tech, we ended up being acquired by Comscore, the measurement company, and this was their pre-IPO. So I had some, great exposure and experiences into some of the early behavioral, data collection. They were really doing some groundbreaking stuff, back then. And after going public, I went out on my own with co-founder, and we founded a company called Crowd Science out of Silicon Valley, and we were working with publishers, built some ad tech to help them build first-party data and to monetize their audiences. So we ended up getting that acquired by another ad tech company called Yumi that shortly after went public. And I spent a fair bit of time justifying why mobile and connected television is, the new medium for advertising. So we got to do some interesting stuff, even around, attention and, in VR. And after that, I ran a little bit of a stint at Kantar here in Canada, running digital and media. But then I got the startup bug again. And we, that brings us to today, where, we've been running, Measure Protocol for just over 4 years now.
Wow, it's pretty packed 25 years from what I can see. And we human beings do not live as long as we would like to, comparing to other species on this planet. But given the speed and agility of how things moving forward in tech, we have this chance to see some things, in their inception. We both saw the internet before it was the internet. Remember the times when Google Maps did not exist. It was actually a separate company acquired by Google later. many things you consider today being part and parcel of Google used to be separate companies. Just
Yeah.
not many people remember those times, and it goes for every big company you can think of right now. But let's talk about Measure Protocol. What sets you guys apart from the rest?
Yeah, so we're a consumer intelligence, data company, and we primarily work with brands and agencies, helping them understand brand engagement using behavioral measurement. So the number of touch points that an individual has with brands is immensely different than it was a short number of years ago. So where we differ is we focus on behaviors across different touch points, different digital touch points from the perspective of the individual. And many of the existing solutions, they actually largely use surveys or metering technologies that today are just increasingly not sustainable. So, and they tend to kind of lack a holistic approach. So, it's a subtle but it's very key difference. While much measurement, say even if you're using an SDK, a little about a large number of apps or individuals, and our atomic unit is actually the individual. So, for example, we don't care so much about downloads. We hear about these millions of downloads, which are impressive numbers. But the reality is the typical individual uses maybe 42 apps. So what happens to
At
all
best.
those
Mm-hmm.
numbers? So our clients think it's more interesting to understand or valuable to understand what app you use, A versus B. So what else are you doing? And when you're increasing usage of some digital activity, what cost is that coming at? Or are you searching for purchases, X versus Y? And all this really ties into competitive intelligence. So you can see user level behaviors across things like app usage, search, now TikTok search, YouTube, Netflix, Amazon purchases, all those things. When you bring those together and expand from the user level versus the top down, the insights you can get are game changing for them. And of course, we specialize on iOS data.
Gotcha, Paul. Yeah, touch points used to be simple. You were driving your car, you saw the Omega watch on the big board, and you wonder, wouldn't it be nice to update your watch, next week? That's it, like one touch point, probably TV commercial, probably radio, but you can count the number of touch points you can count in your just one hand. Today, it's your phone, your smartphone, your desktop computer, your watch. Um, probably in the near future we will be able to put the Vision Pro from Apple kind of
Yeah.
devices to the roast of these things when you're just one extra touch point and making sense of all this data. And yeah, I totally agree that the number of downloads, it's a vanity metric. People love to see this number goes up and up and up, but this, to be honest, it's silly. um at the end of the day, we're talking about people using apps just like any other product. If we don't have any insight into how it's happening, what's working, what's not working, where we and this the this equation of how satisfies people with your product, we're not going anywhere. Let's talk about the report. AppLife Report 2023 Volume 2. It has more than 20 pages. We have like 30 minutes. If we're going to be covering the whole set of 20 pages, it's going to take more than an hour for sure. So we're going to be covering only 5 points.
Sure.
And the link to the report will be in the description of this episode, so you will have a chance to check it out in its entirety. But let's take a bird view look on challenges of understanding consumer behaviors to begin with.
Yeah, there's, and I think this applies to any kind of measurement and, digital data collection. There's a few things to note here. One is that behaviors are more than ever, like you were saying, fragmented across platforms, devices, services, walled gardens. There's no such thing as a single point of influence anymore. So the complexity has gone up. And we're also, secondly, starting to see some of the tech giants starting to play and by different rules. So Apple's taking a very strong stance on privacy.
Oh
So
yeah.
iOS collection is very different than it was just a small number of months ago. Google's deprecating the cookie, which has driven a lot of the last 20 years of measurement, and just this move towards apps versus desktop. This we you hear people talk about a mobile strategy or a mobile first strategy. Increasingly, you're starting to hear a mobile only strategy. Everything else is a byproduct. The other thing we're seeing is legislation. Things like GDPR, CCPA, and now every state has some flavor of it. It's really giving control to users around their data that was often take it for granted. And plus, at the very end, industries have spent many years, of say decades, abusing the consumer. And I think they're kind of fed up. So the value proposition for data collection and engagement is very different than it was in the past. So a lot of our fundamentals of what we do and every decision we make is around, okay, how do we work with being very transparent around data collection, privacy, fair compensation, and the good experience. Now, this should be table stakes. In concept, it's very simple, but in implementation, it's very difficult, very, very difficult. And that's what we strive to do.
Yeah, totally on the same page. It is the difficult process, but there's no other way around. We have to go through this period of, especially with this phase of legislation finally kicking in. Every other major industry previously went through this period. Tobacco industry in 80s, chemical industries in 70s, and later. It was just the tech for a number of years, for a couple of decades, had this privilege being an exception. Partially because folks who are supposed to be working in those legislations did not, and to this day, many of those folks do not understand tech as they should. And here's this gap, and people in Silicon Valley were gladly using that shortcoming of these folks. All right, let's move on the first point on my list of 5 points from this report, which is this. Paraphrasing the famous saying, you don't need to be data scientist to understand different generations, prefer different apps and platforms, but you need to be the one to put it in numbers and build a comprehensive picture with it. So let's talk about generational differences in app preferences.
Yeah, and what's particularly interesting around comparing by generations is, over time, my theory is we'll start seeing convergence across, generations. But where we are today is, if you think about, some of the older generations, like Generation X, they've seen the most technological transformation than any other generation in history. So when you go to the other end, say Gen Z and so forth, they've grown up with touchscreens and on-demand access to to stuff. So we there's a generational divide, but my theory over time is that'll start to to narrow. But there's a few key things that we see around engagement is when you look at social, older generations, they still prefer Facebook. Now it's slowly starting to change, whereas the younger generations, it is the TikToks and Snaps of the world that they go to. we still see Generation X using email and phone, which are actually just apps on these smartphones. The
Right.
phone app is, when you look at the ranking of apps, it's really down low for the younger generations, and it's relatively high for the older ones. And you see, Gen Z, they are using as communication, but it's more around messaging. And also, younger generations are much quicker to jump on these new shopping services like Temu, and these apps are really good at having virality to build an audience. And it's really led by those younger audiences. And despite what you often hear, I think, about younger audiences, that they're distracted, they don't pay attention. I don't think that's it at all. I think that they're just much better at filtering out information that they want. And when they engage very, very, deeply. Whereas older generations, they get overwhelmed by content. And, you start seeing some of the differences around, like TikTok and stuff. It's very apparent that how they process information is very different.
Speaking of TikTok, let's talk about the TikTok's users' behavior. We know that as of right now, TikTok has become one of the leading sources of places where people consume information, media content these days. It's on par with YouTube and Netflix, even Netflix. And I've seen recently this nice chart that shows that TikTok started with 15 seconds length of a video clip, and as of November this year, it went up to 15 minutes. So it's the app is getting on the territory of YouTube, because obviously you can see short videos on YouTube for let's say PBS covering some scientific stuff. This
Mhm.
is uh, it's about a show of episodes 5, 7, 10 minutes in length. So TikTok is getting in that territory. So let's talk about the users' behavior on TikTok from what your report has to say.
Yeah, look, and I think we're just in the early stages, and maybe underappreciate some of the changes that are being driven by TikTok. So, for example, the volume is immense. If you look at younger audiences, they're browsing about 5,400 videos a month. Older audience, it's around 1,600. Now, regardless of the length, that's a massive amount of content. Secondly, actual engagement with the app is through the ceiling. So we see the heavier users are spending about 16 hours a week. The closest is probably a YouTube. The heavier ones are about 6 hours. That's actual usage where they're
Uh-huh.
engaging with the app, which is just, mind blowing. And thirdly, we're starting to see things like it's becoming a destination for search. When we look to, some of the search analysis, things like how-tos come to, the top of the list. So this really starts to impede on some of the territory of not only Google search, but also into YouTube. At one point we would think of search as being, yeah, you go to a browser, you go to Google, and you search. Search is so many different levels now. There's so much in-app search that's happening that then kind of can go into all different places. So I think we're just at the beginning of seeing some of the impact that TikTok is having across the board.
Yeah, just one small tidbit I would like to put on top of this TikTok coverage, which is I've heard this data point recently, which made me pause that TikTok becomes the source of news for many folks. So we drifted from a regional publication, let's say Washington Post, New York Times, Fox News, etc., towards social media platforms. Used to be Facebook, of course, and it is Facebook for, as you said, many folks from Gen X and I would say millennials. But Gen Z is moving towards TikTok as the source of news. It really makes me pause, to be honest. What kind of news people are getting there, given like every news publication has the editorial board, journalists, many things you associate with the journalism, which should be of a high standard. TikTok, just like YouTube, media platform, it no moderation. It's just free floating content flow. Yeah, it's really interesting. But let's talk about the next point, which is consumer journeys, not in life, but in media consumption.
Yeah, so increasingly we're starting to look at how people switch modes and engage with with different services and apps and such, and so these little micro journeys at times, and like you mentioned earlier, once upon a time, media was kind of simple. It was very linear, right? So, and it was easily classified. There was two things that we cared about. We cared about linear television and prime time. That was the basis of media. Now, prime time is no longer a scheduling function. It's moved to the level of an individual. So my prime time may be 11 p.m. till midnight. So this is all very different, and everything is much more extreme, where it's either bite-sized or extended periods of engagement. So, and secondly, we're starting to see the intersection of these things. So you don't just watch, say, television anymore. You're usually checking something on IMDb, or people doing searching, or something completely unrelated. And additionally, we still hang on to this notion of TV, which is a generational thing. Younger generations, they think of content and access to content, and devices are just a basis of accessing this content. So, I come from a generation where things were classified how it was delivered to you. So when we start looking at time sequences, we see a lot of jumping around. And while we may see things like 4% like activities before a TikTok video, maybe a search or a web page visit, these numbers become meaningful when you start looking at that scale. We also see this from TikTok or YouTube or to Amazon as well. How people get there is no longer a linear way. We see influences from a lot from TikTok, and then moving into the shop stuff now, as well as YouTube and others. So I think we're really early in the days of understanding this, and there's a lot of interesting developments happening in there. So I think the key takeaway when we think of journeys is we can no longer think of it as a linear fashion, and this concept of a funnel, it isn't so clear as it used to be before.
Yeah, absolutely. Prime time, 10 a.m. in the morning on Saturday, 7 p.m. on Saturday night to watch the show. It's a bit of a chicken and egg for me. Whether we've got this situation where prime time is not a single time anymore, it's a prime time for everybody. Like everybody have their own prime time, so to
Mm.
speak. And it's because you have your phone in your pocket and you can have your quote unquote prime time anytime you want. And that, lead to that shift where you don't have a single prime time anymore, or the speed of our life, the agility of how things are moving in our daily lives moved us to the place where we're forced to, catch the any moment we have. We don't have a luxury of just sitting in front of a screen at 7 p.m. on Saturday, watch something in that moment. You better grab your iPad and watch it somewhere on a Sunday, or on any commute, on a plane, anywhere. So it's really different picture when you uh, compared to what used to be a few years ago.
Mhm.
We're supposed to be solving TV, as famous story goes. I have a feeling by the time we will solve quote unquote TV, it will not be, it will be just irrelevant for people of that generation. Gen Z will may or actually, we keep talking about Gen Z, like the latest one, but actually there is an extra generation which is younger. I just don't remember the name because these names become more and more funnier as time goes by. But yeah, we may end up in a situation where the TV was kind of solved, but for whom exactly? Okay, let's move to the next point, which is this one way of looking at our life. It's about defining priorities. We're juggling too many things at the same time, and if you're not prioritize stuff you do, you will never get to the bottom of your to-do list. So the next step is your section of the report that talks about priority engagement. What is this?
Yeah, so the lens that we take on everything is, how are people engaging? And then we're always looking for these different, signals. So we think of priority engagement as when you're doing something purposeful. So, for example, when you first pick up your phone, what are you doing? What was your purpose on, for that? And, if we take a moment to consider, things like smartphones as a tool to accomplish things throughout the day, it becomes clear that when you're in a functional mode or if you're in entertainment mode by what you do when you first, pick it up. So, and we still call these things smartphones when the reality is the one thing that they're not very good at being are phones. So, at some point we'll have a better name for it, but there's clearly still communication devices. And so we look at what are some of the top apps that people use when they first pick up the phone. And, we see often it's for communication for all the, generations. So things like messaging, Snapchat, or even Discord tend to be ranked relatively high of the reason why you pick up this device. And so it often ends up being communication or some kind of entertainment. And entertainment will be things like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. All those tend to bubble to the top. So when you look at it at an individual level or across the group, you start seeing it classified as these. And the ones that are really at the top, the younger generations will be the snaps of the world. So this is how to help you classify or understand how people approach this device. And of course, this strongly correlates with the number of notifications that get through. There's a lot more control these days around notifications. So what does get through is actually a strong indicator of how somebody thinks of their device. And the younger you are that we see, it's all about the messaging side of stuff. It's all this bite-sized messaging that's coming through.
Yeah, I've seen the graphics in the report that shows that the messages is one of the apps that gets the biggest number of incoming messages, and you see these notifications. And I think this is the moment when I feel that I'm old because my messages never has the notification sign that says some message was not read because I don't get that many, and I managed to just walk just through the set of messages as they come. But I do know people who, like, when we're on a call and I can see their screen and I occasionally check their messages in the bottom, you can see, gosh, the guy has 500 messages unread. What's going on in his life? How is it even possible? What are those people thinking about him? Or it's the same guys has sent him 500 messages? It's just mind-boggling.
So I'm at the intersection where my messaging is based off of groups of people. So I use Facebook Messenger when I want to communicate with like my mom or something. But then I use Snapchat because my kids won't respond if I try anything else. And then it's a splatter of WhatsApp for people who are across the pond, and then messages for the daily. So it's very purposeful.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move to the final point, which is the top 5 trends that emerge in your report. Let's cover these.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that really jumped out at us. One is TikTok is stronger than ever, and we're only seeing the beginning of this. And Secondly, related to TikTok, Gen Z is more than just entertainment. This is where they search, they communicate that, and they share. It's increasingly becoming a channel for that. Um, Thirdly, we're starting to reach, I believe, a saturation point for the amount of time that people can consume content. Though, especially, even across different, apps and such, there's a lot of evidence that there's simultaneous use of services. And I think this is going to increasingly just keep doubling down. And I also think that this would be maybe the fourth point, starting to see more insights into the routines of individuals across touch points. And I think the next era of measurement and understanding consumer behaviors is what people are doing across things versus individual channels. We'll hear, clients saying, "Oh, we've got tons of YouTube data. We know what's happening there. This is where search is happening." We're like, "Well, what are they doing on TikTok? Are they searching? What are they doing?" And these are like blind spots that they have. So this, cross touch point, cross channel becomes increasingly important. And finally, while some of the younger audiences don't have the same level of disposable income, they're quick to adopt these mobile shopping and finance apps at an alarming rate.
Yeah, you've mentioned that we're moving to the world where this competition between the time people spend on content is increasing. It reminds me of this famous quote from the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings. A few years ago, he said, partially joking, partially not joking, that they only had three competitors slash enemies: YouTube, Facebook, and sleep. So yeah, this is kind of a good analogy, good meta picture of what's going on with this competition for our time, our free time we're willing to spend on watching content. Okay, we've covered the whole 5 points, and now I would like to ask a question that I'd like to ask every guest on the show, especially when you have like 20 plus years under your belt, which is this. Looking at mobile ad tech today, what would you like to change about it the most?
Yeah, and look, I was fortunate to, some of my time in ad tech was during the wild west of it. Um, and I think, my perspective here, I think it extends even beyond ad tech for mobile. It's about digital advertising in general. And what I would love to see is this continued focus on creative. Most of ad technology, whether mobile or not, over the past 20 some years, has been around the efficiency of delivery. And that's really the least interesting things of ad technology. And, there's a debate whether we've seen any progress or not. Um, and good content and good experiences will always win. My theory, this is why TikTok wins. It's about good content. So
Yeah,
that's what I
yeah,
have to see.
that definitely. I can see how it happens. Okay, we've covered the topic on the table, kind of the serious part of the show is over. And the second one is a shorter, quicker. This is my chance to to paint a quick portrait of a guest who comes on the show for the benefit of folks who are listening to us, so they know people are coming on the show a little bit better.
Sure.
Here we go. Question number one. What smartphone do you use now? Are you switcher or staying one side all the time?
I have an iPhone 14 Pro Plus. I made a switch from the BlackBerry Curve many years ago, and I've stayed with the iOS ecosystem. It just makes things easier than switching.
Got you. Speaking of BlackBerry, before the multi-capacity screen phone era, what was your phone which you could, put in your pocket, your first mobile phone?
Oh, this will show my age because it was a Motorola and it came with a purse to carry the battery with you.
Nice, nice. Yeah. These days, Motorola, you have to look up in the Wikipedia what is Motorola, what is it was famous for. Uh, it's interesting. Okay, back to present. Imagine you've left your home, and for whatever reason, you left your smartphone at home. You don't have it with you, and you're out. What is the most missing feature for you?
Oh, hands down, it's the camera.
You'll have to
Yeah,
take the shots, right?
yeah. I'm the one. I don't know. I probably got 15,000 photos on my phone. I'm taking snapshots of things, screenshots, videos of a little bit of everything.
Now I see why it's pro model.
Yeah.
Okay, but as great as this device is, if you think about it, like what's the feature could be or hardware, software, or both that for you your iPhone 14 Pro is missing right now, which you would like to have to make it better tool for you.
Make it a better tool. Like I think the technology piece that interests me even more, which may be a little bit odd, is around watches, which is an extension of your phone, really. And I think this is, the biggest problem or challenge we have with watch technology is we still think of it as a watch. And I think today's, so I have, the iPhone watch, obviously. Um, but today's watch technology, I think, is just transition technology. It's an experimental playground. Because once you start developing the, habits around this other device that hangs off of you, the times that you pull out your phone are very purposeful. Like that's why I say a camera.
Yeah.
Um, it's, on the go, you're not typing away on emails. You may be, talking into your watch to send a message or something. So, the side of technology that I think is going to become really interesting is going to be the wearable watch, what we call a watch today. I think we're really just in the beginning of that stuff.
Definitely. I think it brings us back to the generational thing, which is the Apple Watch came to market as on the shoulders of giants, regular watches before I had the Apple Watch. Because it used to be, and for some folks, it still is a device people were wearing under arrest. And but it not the case. Definitely for Gen Z, I yet to see some Gen Z folk walking on the street wearing a watch. If it's not an Apple Watch, so having something on your wrist to tell you time, it may be something that would be dying with us, with our generation.
Yeah.
So yeah, over time it would be not relevant for folks like Gen Z and younger.
Yeah.
We'll see. Time will tell for sure.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, very, very final question. How can people get in touch with you and get more information about what you do?
Sure. Always open. Just reach out to me at paul@measureprotocol.com. Hit me up on LinkedIn or any of the other channels, or visit us at www.measureprotocol.com, and happy to connect.
Sweet. Paul, thank you so much for your time and spending this 30 plus minutes with us on the show. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
And that was Paul Neto, co founder, chief marketing officer at Measure Protocol. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. Remember, we release episodes on Mondays. So subscribe and you will be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review or comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.